Hi, welcome back to Hazel Jane Tarot, and thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be going into depth looking at the Devil card. This is a card that I find particularly difficult at the beginning, one that I still find very confronting and challenging now, but more from the meanings that I understand to come from it, than the kind of potentially scary imagery in some of the depictions of the devil. So today we're going to be unpicking some of the symbolism and the meanings of the card and ways in which it might come up in readings. So the first thing when I started to look at the devil card, the first thing that I wanted to really consider was the different names that come up for the devil. And it isn't always called the same thing in different decks. So the Rider-Waite-Smith version, we have the devil, and this symbolism we're going to maybe look at in more detail in a minute. But the Gaian Tarot calls the card bindweed. The Numinous Tarot calls it the shadow. We have temptation in the Slow Tarot. We have the demon in the Spirit Keeper's Tarot, which I don't have here, and the in the Druidcraft Tarot it's called Cernunnos. So we've got lots of different namings with the different depictions of the devil card. So the key words that I associate with the devil are addiction, feeling trapped or controlled, a damaging excess in some part of your life, being out of balance, materialism, sexual energy, and the invitation to free yourself. And the out of balance is interesting when we look at it in relation to the card that came just before, Temperance, which is about a balanced mingling of different elements. Whereas in the devil, potentially things are out of balance, or to excess. So the first thing I started looking at when I was researching the card was the question of who is the devil in the tarot. So if we look here at this, oh sorry, what? Excuse my hand. So who the devil are you? So a couple of different things that I looked at. So we've got a satyr who is half man, half goat, and was associated with excessive lusts and drunkenness in Roman mythology. We have Baphomet, who is this is probably quoted from Wikipedia, Sabbatic goat embodiment of all things, male and female, good and evil. And the Knights Templar were accused of worshipping Baphomet. So if you're familiar with more sort of Christian iconography, the image of this horned god, Baphomet, is associated with iconography of the devil and as being evil. But it was interesting to find in researching this that it is the embodiment of all things, good and evil, and not just evil, and that is potentially a sort of a persecutory historical context that makes this imagery associated with evil particularly. And then of course we've got Pan, the Greek goat god of untamed nature and sexuality, and a bit more on him later because I've got the Mythic Tarot here. And then you have Cernunnos, also the horned god of fertility, animals, wealth, and the underworld. The idea of wild sexuality, of hunting, of the life cycle, nature. And so the goat's head with man's animal is representing man's animal nature and divine, and then the divine nature. And so these images of like Cernunnos come from a Wiccan or pagan tradition, and that these have been potentially positioned as evil by the Christian church, rather than being inherently representative of evils when they originated as an image. So that is really interesting if when you look at this image of the Rider-Waite-Smith devil, and you're thinking of the devil in a Christian context as being a tempter and an embodiment of evil, which is the tempter part is a big part of what the meanings associated with this card. But it's useful to think of the sort of more balanced representation that's implied by this image if you think about sort of the pagan roots of the image and so on. So we're going to then have a look at the imagery within the actual card and some of the symbolism in the devil card from the Rider-Waite-Smith. So the colours aren't great there in that printout that I've got in my book. Let me see if the actual card looks any better on camera. Sorry. Yes, that is a little bit better. Sorry, it's just the light maybe. So looking at the symbolism then, we have the reversed pentagram here on the head. So this represents the spirit being subservient to matter. So matter being, you know, the body and the sort of physical and material things of this world having dominance over the spirit. And it was interesting to see that the posture of the hand raised and the hand down mimics the posture of the magician in the first card of the Major Arcana. The devil here is depicted with bat's wings. So that associates maybe with images of a vampire and the idea of, or like a vampire bat, you know, draining blood, draining vitality from someone. So this maybe associates with some of the more damaging associations with the devil card. And that idea that a bat sleeps upside down, and that's, you know, seems to humans to be against the natural order, you know, going against gravity and so on. So that might also feed into the strangeness of the devil. The posture, as I'm sure you're aware, if you've been looking at tarot, the postures of the characters and the layout of the card is very, very similar to the Lovers card. So whereas in the Lovers you have the angel with the spread wings and the sort of Adam and Eve characters below, here you have a male and a female character chained up by this devil in the middle, presiding over them in a similar way to the angel. So if you think about the themes of the Lovers card, it looks at relationships, but it also looks at choices. And so those themes of choices and relationships with others are coming up again in this card. And it's interesting as well if you think that 15 here, the devil, 1 + 5 = 6, which is the number of the Lovers card. So that association with the Lovers is really strong. So one of the things, when you look at the image, you can see that the chain around the necks of these two people, they're quite loose. So we imagine these chains could be lifted off. So the sense of being chained and being trapped is illusory. It's not something that couldn't be overcome, but it's you can see that these people, you know, they have now got tails, they've got horns, so they've been in this position a long time, like these humans are turning into demons through their entrapment here, but they could potentially take the chains off. They're being held in a place of total darkness, and so the darkness maybe creates an illusion that where they are is all there is. They can't see anything else. So maybe representing how difficult it might seem to escape this situation. And but the darkness could also represent our subconscious. And then we have this idea of the torch pointing down, emphasizing the fact that this is about the material plane and about material life. So I have here put a little music quote, "I want to break free," which just really seemed to sum up what the devil was about for me. And here I've got a little advice box for the card. So you're not as helpless as you feel. It's time to take responsibility for your life and how you're affecting yourself, others, and the earth through your choices. So that kind of sums up some of the key messages of the devil card for me. So before we look into the divinatory meanings, I want to have a look at some of the particular depictions and how, you know, when you work with a different depiction of a card, it really can add to your understanding of it. So like if we look at this one from the Mythic Tarot, so sorry, the light, there we go. I need to keep my hand in to keep the white balance. So the devil here in the Mythic tarot, you see a lot of similar elements, like there's the people, the little horned people chained or tied up. And the figure here is very similar to the horned figure that we see in the RWS Devil card. But here what we're looking at is specifically intended to represent Pan. So that was the Greek goat god that I mentioned earlier. So the Mythic Tarot guidebook tells us that a goat in Greece was considered a dirty, lecherous animal. But then it's also scapegoated potentially, that people project their own kind of baser sides onto this creature to make themselves feel more righteous. So like to separate themselves from those more kind of earthy aspects of the self, and to feel more of spirit or more righteous, that they're not like this. So the Hermes was the father of Pan, and the nymph Dryope was the mother. And he was an ugly baby, apparently, poor soul, and was abandoned. But apparently then was brought by Hermes to amuse the gods, and then wandered the woods of Arcadia. And it represents sort of the darkness of the subconscious, and is not immoral, but rather amoral, kind of separate from those ideas of right and wrong, and instinctive rather than not following the rules of society, a more instinctive and natural character. So that is potentially, when you look at the mythology around the devil, a more positive spin on the character, by seeing it through the lens of the character Pan, than we might be more used to thinking of a Christian concept of the devil. A card that I really enjoy the depiction of this key 15 is Bindweed here in the Gaian Tarot. So the Joanna Powell Colbert here has used a lot of different elements to capture the spirit of this idea of feeling trapped, making poor choices, and that are damaging yourself, others, and the world around you, in the image here. So the different elements, so the Gaian Tarot guidebook tells us this: starlings here depicted are an invasive species, which can take over an area and reduce the food supply for local birds and so on. And the plant bindweed that's used in the title of the card, bindweed is also an invasive species, so takes over, suffocates out the native wildlife. And obviously there's the kind of wordplay in the name of bindweed, reflecting the way we can be bound by certain things. So it makes you think about the choices that you make, and the substances and behaviors that we indulge in, which can take over our life and can cause us damage. So really thinking about addictions, or things around maybe foods, drugs, alcohol, behaviors that are damaging to the self, that we might undertake, but also encourages us, because of this, the Gaian Tarot has a kind of environmental aspect to it as well, encourages us to think about our impact on the world around us, where these introduced invasive species have then gone on to cause damage. So how does our behaviors affect the world around us? And like this character, they are in the midst of this, they're trapped and they can't see a way out of this. But the card Bindweed really shows us that change is possible and necessary. It just doesn't look like it is. So like we have these chains around the neck of these characters here in the RWS, who they can't see any way out of where they are, but they could just lift these chains off. Obviously, it's not easy, or it would have been done already, but there is a way out. And that is part of the core message of the Bindweed card as well. The depiction of the devil in the Numinous Tarot is also really confronting and quite deep. So this card is called the Shadow. So if we think about the shadow, we're looking at aspects of the self that are unacknowledged, things that are, hidden from ourselves that we're not addressing. And in this case, if you look at the way that it's drawn, that the person is bound, but they don't seem to be bound to anyone or anything external. And this hollow void in the heart of the person is really confronting, and the lack of eyes, they're not able to see a way clear. So this idea of the guidebook for the Numinous Tarot suggests that we need to be brave enough to reach inside ourselves and untie the knots that bind us. So it might not be like a physical addiction to something. They can be mental, internal thought patterns or attachments that are binding us in a negative way that's represented here in this card. So, using different versions of the card, can have different impacts. Just to quickly look at another few, like this version of the devil in the Housewives Tarot is good fun, but it definitely speaks to something that I can relate to. We have cigarettes and pills and coffee and processed meat and a big chocolate cake and a drink, and this card really explicitly addresses the temptation of maybe pleasurable but harmful substances that we enjoy and indulge in, and then maybe enjoy to excess and harm ourselves with. I think I've maybe mentioned in previous videos, one of my issues is around weight and excess weight, and a card like this actually really does speak to me, because the chocolate cake is a bit of the devil for me, in terms of addictive eating habits and negative impact on my body with the foods that I eat. So that is something that, while it is playfully rendered, and it does limit the scope of what the devil can represent, by focusing on just this one aspect, but it certainly speaks to me. Another card that I know has been somewhat of a controversial depiction of the devil sort of falls into that category a little bit, I think, of reducing and focusing on a particular aspect of the devil card by, in this case, renaming it to temptation. I think one of the controversies in the Slow Tarot with this card was that this woman depicted here is, as in the devil card, is the only bigger body person in the deck, and having a larger body depicted as the negative thing potentially is in the temptation card, and as something to be avoided. That people had a problem with that, and I can understand that. For me, however, as a person who maybe this represents some of my struggles fairly, in a very confronting way. This idea of temptation and overindulgence and the impact of that on the body is something that really struck me, and I didn't particularly think to find it problematic until other people raised the issue, and then I realized that yes, having the only large body being depicted in this way is potentially problematic when you see the deck as a whole. But this particular card, I think, is quite effective. Also, this looks like it's quite the party going on here. There's a lot of sexual indulgence and indulgence in food and alcohol and so on. And this is maybe kind of the morning after the party, and so on. And in that way, it maybe reflects this depiction from This Might Hurt Tarot, where you have a party going on here. People are dancing and kissing and drinking and partying, and but they're all chained. So while they seem to be free and dancing and indulging and enjoying their life, they're being overseen by this character that's very similar to the iconography of the RWS devil. But it depicts those chained people, but maybe in a more of a modern setting. And that's maybe quite kind of similar. It's the being at the thinking that you're free by enjoying the whatever it is, the alcohol, the food, but there's an excess here that's harmful in these depictions of the devil. And then some others are maybe a bit more open and broad and could, there's more scope for it. Could be lots of different kinds of temptation. Like here we have the red wings and the apple. It's very much thinking of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and the idea of temptation, and maybe simpler, more kind of symbolic terms here in the Dreamkeeper's Tarot. And then in this, the Lightseer's Tarot, we have this incredibly engaging male standing here with his kind of dead eyes, but certainly he's very alluring. But he has the person, very similar to the bindweed character, actually, with the head down, like a little puppet on a string there. So when I sit and study a card, that's my process. Like I take out all the different versions and I have a look at them. There's one more version here I wanted to look at. It's quite confronting imagery. This is from the New Era Elements Tarot. And so this is very, I've often thought this is not a deck I could really use to read for adults, because or for others, if you pulled the card out and that came up, like it's just such a horrific image. But it really does confront you to think about the broader, not just the personal consequences of choices, but the more global consequences of choices. So, you can see genocide and racism and totalitarianism and capitalism and all these sort of all these manifestations of evil at large in the world. And it really confronts us to think about how our choices, the broader impacts that our choices have, and that these evil ideologies and evil actions are, they're not just abstract, they're based on actions taken by people. And to think about how we interact in the world and the choices we make, and not to blindly follow harmful ideologies that are harmful to others and to the world. So while the New Year Elements Tarot is not a deck that I work with on a regular basis, sometimes when I've been working on this tarot journal, I've had to bring that deck in because of the different layer of meaning that it adds to my study of the card. Just to go back to the meanings then of the card. Looking at the Fool's Journey. So here like I had with Temperance, I've written a little bit of a Fool's Journey out for my own words, and I've used female pronouns because those are my own pronouns. So the Fool's Journey, the Fool is immediately, so after you've left Temperance, challenged to confront her shadows, her unhealthy behaviours, her darkest thoughts. Her newfound balance that was achieved in Temperance is tested, and she must confront these aspects of herself. So it is, in the Fool's Journey, a looking inwards and a confronting of the darker, of the unhealthy aspects of the self, your shadows, unhealthy behaviours and thoughts. But the positive, and the Spirit Keeper's Tarot, Benabel Wen in her guidebook talks about this particularly, that the angel of Temperance, the guardian angel, as she conceives it in her deck, is still with the seeker then from that point on. So once you've got to Temperance, the guardian angel is then with you for the rest of the Fool's Journey. So as you face the darkest challenges of the devil and then the tower, that the angel of Temperance is still with you. So that is a nice comforting thought. So some of the meanings then that I associate with the devil card. So we have temptation. So think about what temptations you might be subject to or have already given into. Think about addictions of the body. So addictions to food, alcohol, to drugs, unhealthy addictions to sex. And there is obviously a lot of sexual associations with the devil card, and whilst sex in itself is obviously not a negative thing, some of the meanings attached to this card are challenging us to explore what kind of sex is represented. So it could be a physical relationship without the higher influence of love, a relationship based only on physical attraction. Now, that in itself isn't necessarily that's not necessarily a bad thing, obviously, but maybe if you were doing a love reading for somebody, and they wanted to know, is this partner that I'm currently with, is he or she the love of my life? Are we going to get married and live happily ever after? And the devil came up, you might be thinking, okay, well, maybe not. Maybe this is a fun, fiery, physical relationship, but it's not necessarily at the minute looking like it's going to turn into, a kind of longer term, or, more emotional or spiritual union. Obviously, it would depend on the other cards in the deck and so on, but just to see how that might fit in, or how that might come up in a reading. It could represent sexual appetites being excessive, or it could represent somebody being manipulative or controlling in a relationship. Think about the chains that are depicted in these devil cards. Is one partner, could be you or the other person, in the position of controlling or manipulating the other. It could also talk to shame about the body, that needs to be addressed, or moving away from the physical, a need to confront the shadows, fears, and projections of your personality, to know and humbly accept yourself, to face your own darkness. And, particularly a depiction like that one, the shadow from the Numinous Tarot, would particularly speak to that aspect of the card. It could represent really strong emotions around an issue, so anger, hatred, lust, self-loathing, even like really strong emotions could be depicted by the devil. And fears, biases, feelings to keep hidden, memories that haunt us, things that need to be looked at with compassion and care, maybe even with support, from a professional, or someone in your life who can support you to address some of those issues. The reversed meanings then, I have considered things like, if you turn this the devil card upside down, then the people are in the dominant position over the devil. The pentagram has turned right side up. The chains could potentially fall off the neck. So if you look at the imagery reversed, how that can affect the reversed meaning. So thinking about things like, you've confronted your fear or your shadow, your addiction, whatever it is that has been represented by the card, could mean an acceptance of the body and the physical, could mean freedom from addiction, or moving on from a job or a relationship, or where you felt controlled or bound, or being released from false inhibitions and so on. So there's lots of different aspects. And of course, the trick, not the trick, I mean, it's not a trick, the skill and the experience that comes with tarot reading is which of these aspects of the card is the one that's relevant to the reading. And just to make the card's not always going to be negative. Like, if you were doing a reading and you were trying to decide about something, and it's like, what's the, and this card came up in a positive, in a positive position. What does that mean? How could this be a positive, this card about addictions and so on? So I've got a little box here called Party with the Devil. So this idea of hedonistic abandon that's represented by the devil card, which potentially as a temporary thing, it would be a really positive thing. Some people might need to let go a bit and to enjoy the physical sides of life. So if this came up in a positive role, it makes you think about Dionysus from the Greek tradition, this idea of, or is Dionysus the Roman name? Anyway, the hedonistic abandon, enjoying excessive food or drinking, going to a party, enjoying lust and sexual pleasure, maybe even something a bit kinky, and just passion and fire in your life. And there could be, if this was in a positive position in a spread, It might be speaking to you to, maybe lose control for a while and don't be so conscious of trying to control all of your choices. So while for me, in the most case, in my experience of reading, it has tended to represent, the devil has tended to represent something that needs to be moved on from, addressed, and it has come up for me a lot as a personal challenge to really have a look at, as I say, my eating habits and some of the issues that might underlie those. But the devil card does potentially have that positive side of really indulging as well. So my goodness, I've talked for half an hour about the devil card. I hope that has been helpful to you. If you're studying tarot, as we all always are studying tarot, no matter 20 plus years on, still studying tarot. And I would love to hear, what you think about what I've said, if you resonate with any of those interpretations, or if the devil tends to come up in a particular way for you. I'd love to hear about that in the comments. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more like this, please subscribe to my channel. Bye.